Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, let's dive right in. Have you ever just stared at a huge stack of multiple choice tests and thought, man, there has to be a better way to measure true learning? Well, if you have, you're absolutely in the right place. Today, we're talking about shifting away from rote memorization and towards real-world performance. We'll be using a brilliant framework called GRASPs to get us there. It's a real game changer, and we're going to break down exactly how you can create these rich, engaging learning experiences. To get us there, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the authentic assessment shift, then framing tasks with GRASPs. After that, building a real-world scenario. And finally, we'll wrap things up with the authenticity verification checklist. Think of this as your practical, step-by-step masterclass in curriculum design. All right, starting off with Section 1, the authentic assessment shift, from knowing to doing. Let's first talk about why we fundamentally need to move our students from just memorizing facts to actually applying what they learn. So, what exactly do we mean by authentic assessment? Simply put, it's a realistic task that asks students to actually do the subject. It replicates the contexts where adults are tested in the workplace or in civic life. The crucial thing here is that it requires judgment, innovation, and navigating complex tasks. We're preparing students to face the exact same types of messy, open-ended challenges that adults deal with every single day in the real world. Now, I want you to picture the whole assessment landscape as concentric circles. The largest, outermost circle, that represents traditional assessments, your standard tests, your quizzes, basic skill checks. Inside that, you have a smaller circle for performance tasks. But right there, nested at the very core, are authentic tasks. They represent the absolute most specialized, context-rich tier of assessment. It isn't just about performing a skill, it's about performing that skill within genuine, real-world constraints. Let's draw a really sharp contrast here. Typical tests, they're often just a game of guess what the teacher is thinking. They require correct responses to isolated facts, totally disconnected from the real world, and usually in a one-shot attempt. Authentic tasks, on the other hand, demand a high-quality product or performance. They're tied to real-world constraints, involve integrated complex challenges, and they are iterative. That means students actually get to refine their work. It's a complete paradigm shift from simple recall to complex integration. Moving on to Section 2, framing tasks with GRASPs, the architectural blueprint. So now that we know what an authentic assessment looks like conceptually, how do we actually go about building one? Well, think about constructing a house. If you've ever watched a building go up, you know carpenters frame out the individual rooms, the walls, the doors, the windows, based entirely on the dimensions specified in an architectural blueprint. Without a sturdy frame, the whole building collapses. And you know what? An assessment falls flat without one too. The idea of framing applies perfectly to the construction of performance tasks, and that is exactly where the GRASPs acronym comes into play. Here is how the GRASS framework builds out step by step. Step 1 is the goal. You've got to establish the challenge, issue, or problem to solve. Step 2 is role, giving the student a meaningful, real-life persona. Step 3 is audience, identifying who exactly the student is solving this problem for. Step 4 is situation, setting up that contextualized scenario. Step 5 is product, defining what the student creates and why. And finally, Step 6 is standards, the criteria by which their successful performance will actually be judged. This is literally your blueprint for design. Okay, Section 3, building a real-world scenario, the rainforest simulation. It's one thing to just read through an acronym, but let's shift into a totally immersive example so we can see this blueprint in action. We're going to focus on a high-stakes science and geography scenario. Imagine reading this prompt to your class. You are a member of a team of scientists investigating deforestation of the Papua New Guinean rainforests. Boom! Right away, the student is hooked. We've just established the role, an investigative scientist, and the situation, investigating deforestation. The learner is completely immersed in the narrative. Next, we layer in the goal and the audience. The goal is to determine deforestation trends, and the audience, a United Nations subcommittee. Notice how this instantly elevates the stakes? We aren't just filling out a standard classroom worksheet to hand back to the teacher anymore. Suddenly, the student is preparing to present to the UN on a global stage. How cool is that? Then, we contrast the required product against the standards. The product they are tasked with creating is a scientific report and a clear, complete action plan. The standards dictate that their recommendations must be detailed and fully supported, judged as if by that UN subcommittee. This means your students know exactly how their high-quality performance is going to be evaluated before they even start. And this brilliantly illustrates how the entire scenario cleanly fits into the GRSPS frame. Goal, role, audience, situation, product, and standards, all of it working together. By unpacking the task this way, you take a standard curriculum topic and transform it into a purposeful, highly engaging simulation for the learner. Which brings us to Section 4, the Authenticity Verification Checklist, the final inspection. Once you've designed your brilliant task using GRASPs, you really need a quality control measure. Think of this as the final building inspection before you let students actually move in. Let's run through this essential 7-point checklist for authentic tasks. Does your task address targeted standards? Does it call for a transfer of knowledge? Does it require extended thinking rather than just a simple answer? Does it have a meaningful, real-world context? Are there rubrics targeting distinct traits of understanding? Are the directions crystal clear? And finally, does it allow for appropriate student choice? A great pro tip here: show your task to a colleague. If they can't easily guess the targeted standard being addressed just by looking at the task, well, your alignment probably needs a little more work. I want to zoom in on that extended thinking requirement for just a second. Authentic performance tasks should ideally target depth of knowledge, or DOK, level 3. This means we're fully embracing the messy reality that there isn't always a single right answer. Students are expected to support their interpretations and conclusions by explaining their reasoning and citing actual evidence. It's all about deep, strategic thinking. Which brings us to a final question for you as an educator. What real-world role will your students step into tomorrow? Are they going to be health workers preventing disease, town council members fighting litter, or scientists addressing the UN? The GRASPs blueprint gives you the exact tools to make it happen. So let's stop testing just for recall and start designing for reality. I hope this explainer has left you inspired and ready to apply the GRASPs framework in your very next lesson plan. Thank you so much for learning with us today.